Hello!
Welcome back, everyone, to Underqualified episode 3.
I've done that in every episode now. That's my intro.
Hello!
Hello!
We're going to take a somewhat different approach today. You may
have a
notice
special guest.
that we have a special guest, our mother.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Katie.
Wow, great job. And the first few episodes, we talked about scientific things or psychological things that we thought were interesting but didn't really have a lot of expertise in. And today, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about us today because I know that that's what all of you want to hear about. And we're going to talk about us specifically with regards to music. Because we come from a very musical family. We are all singers. He's going to music school.
Like a fool.
To be a music educator. So there's lots of ground to cover as I attempt to turn on my stopwatch. There we go. And so we're just going to kind of talk about how we all discovered our love for music and how it relates to our family in general and just kind of what got us to our spot today. And we're going to see how long that takes us and how well it goes.
How are we gonna structure this? We could have talked about that before. Or was it just like a go around or a open forum?
You want to go first?
I wasn't sure if we were like talking about specific, like we were all gonna break it up, or if we were just gonna have a talking time for Benjamin, a talking time for Nicholas, a talking time for Mom.
A little bit of both.
You know
We
what
can
I mean?
jump in, but how about,
You know what I mean?
Tell us about what led you to be so connected with music that you want to do it for a job.
Oh, okay.
Start from the beginning.
Okay. Well, it all started when I was born.
It was all downhill from there.
It's just been off the rails since then. But no, I mean, sort of in our family, it was always sort of like you're gonna be musical or you're gonna be out in the streets, you know. Not actually, but like it's just sort of been assumed. Like I can't recall a time when music wasn't a part of our family life. I mean, it's grown and blossomed as we've pursued different things later in life, but certainly I think the passion was always there, and that was part of that was just nature, and part of that was nurture with what Mom sort of instilled in us, and getting us in piano lessons early on, and kids choir over at Welsher, like, and at our church. And then from there, let's see, I spent about an hour singing for a local children's choir in Colorado.
Who shall not be named.
Who shall remain nameless. And I hated it. Oh my god. I hated it so much. And luckily, I think if you were a different parent, that could have been, oh, well, he doesn't like choir. So that would be it. But,
Or force you to do
or
it.
just-
or you would have forced me to do it, and then I would have just continued to expound on this idea that like I just hate singing because I hated the context in which it was happening so much, and that was it just wasn't a good fit for sassy second grade me who already wanted to be treated like an adult, I guess. And so luckily I found my way into a different environment that was better for me and sort of fostered that love of music. And so I found a good fit there with singing. And then that led me to getting to the point where music would be part of my school or part of my educational life in a larger capacity, and wanting to pursue that, and ended up not wanting to sing at I'm just taking you like from the way back. So we were at second grade, now we're jumping to sixth grade. Okay, so and I ended up not wanting to sing in middle school for reasons, and
shall also remain nameless.
And so I ended up taking up the cello and playing in orchestra in middle school, which I loved and was awesome. I still have love in my heart for orchestra people for sure. And did that for a time, and that was really I was still singing then.
Right.
I didn't leave,
just not in the public schools.
Right. Yeah, I was still singing in my children's choir outside of school, still taking piano lessons, and then also adding on the cello. And so that was there was a lot of music going on at that point, and it didn't necessarily feel that way because I was still trying to be athletic and doing other things for school, and so it wasn't necessarily my main focus, but it was definitely an emphasis for sure, even from that early point. And then I had a wonderful middle school orchestra director. She'll probably never see this, but
you can name her if you want to give some credit.
Yeah, her name was Miss McCormick.
Yep.
At the time, I think she got married in 8th grade, and I can't remember what her married name is. Gunnison, maybe something like that. But she was wonderful, and there was this after-school group that played at my middle school that was sort of the more advanced players. So a lot of the people who were taking private lessons outside of school who knew that they wanted to play their instrument in high school.
Yeah.
Which was not me at all. I never took cello lessons, and I figured, do this for a couple years in middle school and then be done, which is what ended up happening. But that being said, I had no intention of being in that after school group at all. I think I did it 7th and 8th grade year. I don't think I played in it in 6th grade, but I don't really remember. But I got to 7th grade, and I was one of just a handful of cellists that was left in my grade, and so maybe it was more out of necessity,
desperation,
than her seeing any particular promise in me. But regardless of that, she said, "Hey, you should come play with our after-school orchestra. I think you do really great." And I showed up at that first rehearsal, and I was way in over my head. And this was even still not impressively challenging literature. It was just different. It was a different level than what I was accustomed to in our basic grade level playing. And there were some heavy hitters in the
who were already really good.
Yeah, like our 8th graders at the time who had been taking privates since they were 2.
Suzuki method.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was a little wide-eyed, and I was like, "Man, are you sure you want me playing this? It does not sound like it's supposed to." But that was when I guess my mindset towards music changed a little bit, and it wasn't just that was sort of the jumping off point where I was wanting to be good at it, I guess, and not just sort of going through the motions. In part because I was so embarrassed to be at such a lower level of playing than
like a little bit of shame to
than
get
any of these other players. But at the same time, that shame wasn't discouraging because Miss McCormick was saying "Hey, I'm so glad you're playing with us. You're doing a great job," and also just my other orchestra players, nobody was like, "Why is he here?" So that was nice too.
Just try to move your bow at the same time as everybody else.
Right.
Don't let it get too close to the strings.
Exactly. And so then I did that 7th and 8th grade. I like to tell people that I was the first stand cellist of my 8th grade orchestra. There were 3 of us, but I was the best one.
Shot.
Yeah. And then got to the end of the orchestra run, made the transition to singing in high school, and also got out of the children's choir that I was doing, which was sad. Both leaving orchestra and the children's choir behind was difficult, but I wanted to do I had this desire to do music in a larger capacity and also still be doing other things. So I was I was swimming year round, competitively, and taking some hard academic classes. And so eventually you get to a point where you start to specialize a little bit, and in some part because he was already there in high school singing at a high level, at like the highest level that you could at our high school, then I was sort of like, well, I want to do that. But also I just knew that music was sort of a route that I wanted to continue to pursue. And so I got into high school choir, and it was pretty much just off to the races after that. It became a much larger part of my identity, a much larger part of my social group for sure. A lot of pretty much all through high school, it was either swim team friends or choir friends, and that's sort of how I circulated. And once I got into high school, I just decided that I don't know that there was a decision, but that's where sort of the love affair with music really took on a different tone, and it was something that I needed to breathe. I guess.
Sure.
It was essential. So I never really felt before that it was a fundamental part of who I was until I got to high school and fell in love with choral music in a different way than I had before. And so then singing just took over my life over the next 4 years, doing it in a variety of different spaces, whether that was our classical choir at high school, or singing jazz music in jazz choir, or singing at church in our adult sanctuary choir, or taking on a little bit of a leadership role in the youth choir at church. And so there was a point where I was singing in like 5 different choirs in high school, and I loved it. And I'm just somebody with a lot of different interests and different passions. And so when I got to the point in high school where I started contemplating what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, there weren't that many things that I thought I could stick with for,
without wanting to move to something else.
Work for 50 years and then die and be okay with that. Because music, there was, throughout my K through 12 education, I guess, there was a lot of stuff that sort of came and went in terms of interest. So even, orchestra or different sports that I tried and wasn't very good at, it would be a couple of years where that was the thing.
Right.
And then that would sort of move along, and in part because you really wanted me to stick with music, and in part because I also, whether I knew it or not, really wanted me to stick with music. That was pretty much the only thing that persisted, and it was definitely the extracurricular that I was most proficient at. And so even when I had sort of had this falling in love with choral music and some new experiences, like getting to be a student leader in our choral ensembles in high school, that had a big impression on me as well. It was pretty late in the game, I think, that I started to have this idea of music as a career and music as my life. Because I was pushing myself academically for sure, and math is sort of my subject. That's definitely my strongest as a student, and so for a while I was thinking, I'm just going to definitely do something with math. And you were thinking, he's definitely going to do something with math, and if he doesn't do something with math, that's a shame. And I've always had a desire to go into education, and that stems from a lot. Am I talking too long? I've talked for like 15 minutes. Okay. I've always had a desire to go into education, and that stems from a lot of different places. Part of that is our sort of family lineage of educators, with my dad being a college professor and my his dad being a college professor. And so I was very, very aware of that. But also, there's always been something special for me about helping another person understand something and passing knowledge on to them. And I feel like, especially with music, that's the greatest impact that you can make as a musician, is inspiring a love of music in somebody else. And that can take on a number of different forms. If you're a performer by trade, you can do that through a performance, right? And for me, my love is every day in rehearsal and seeing the growth of young students. That's what I want to be there for. And that's the part of the musical journey that is most special to me, or I assume will be. I haven't really taught.
I was going to ask
much.
you if there was a moment that you can recall, which would be hard, where you were like, "Oh yeah, music education is what I want to be doing."
Yeah, well, again, I was blessed with wonderful music teachers and educators throughout my life, both in a strictly K through 12 setting and also taking private lessons outside of that. I've always had wonderful teachers who have sort of encouraged the growth of that passion for me. But I think the concept of wanting to be a teacher came around first, and that really blossomed from just working with kids and being with around children. And that started at church, in childcare and Vacation Bible School. And so I knew that was my calling, I guess, was to work with young people.
Sure.
And it didn't really take on the connotation of music. I'm trying to recall the timeline until maybe middle of my junior year in high school. I really started thinking that music was the way I want to go. And you have to kind of make that decision because it's a big whole process to be a music person in higher education.
Stuff.
Yeah, you started looking at schools
based
for
on
their music program.
Yeah, exactly. And so there were a couple just big moments for me junior year. Junior year was the first time I was in the highest ensembles at my high school. And I was challenged with being a section leader that year, which was a new experience for me. And so one of the things that you get to do as a section leader is sort of lead mini rehearsals. And I loved that. And it's not even really supposed to be that big of a deal. But I got so into it, and I was like, I'm going to bring my music home, and I'm going to prep, and I'm going to like make a lesson plan for what I want to work on with the basses in our next rehearsal.
I definitely did not do that as a section leader.
Yeah, and I mean, you certainly don't have to. And like, I didn't necessarily even have the skills to, run a rehearsal effectively, but I so enjoyed like the idea of doing it and the experience of doing it. And so that was a big deal. And just being around the quality of musicians that were in those groups, that really pushed me to take a different attitude towards singing. And that was the first year I got to do all-state choir. That was the first year. No, we didn't go to TMEA that year. I went to TMEA myself, or not TMEA, CMEA. I lived in Colorado at the time.
The Colorado one.
Yeah, the Colorado Music Educators Association. I went there my sophomore year, and that was also a big deal. But we went to the Southwest American Choral Directors Association, their conference, my junior year, and that was a big deal there too. I was part of I wasn't really a soloist, but I was part of a quartet there, and so that was cool. Got my name in the program.
There you go.
And and so that's really where I turned a corner, especially in terms of just my level of anxiety about performing, because my junior year it just flipped a switch and I had to perform so much that it was sort of like you're thrown into the deep end. And so up to that point it was sort of, you can dread this concert that you have a solo in for 2 months in the lead up, and then it's over and it's done. Whereas that year it was like, oh, if you got a solo, you're singing it every couple of weeks
Right.
for the entire
Right.
semester,
Yeah.
both semesters. And so that took on a very different flavor, and I sort of came out of my shell as a musician. And I got to the end of that year having really been put through the ringer of performances and all of the typical music person struggles of worrying about being good enough and et cetera, et cetera. And I just really felt like I had found my people and my purpose. And so I'm not sure that I can refer you to a specific aha moment, but it was definitely that environment that fostered this idea for me that this is what I wanted to do. And the music education that I received in, especially in high school, but throughout, I said I had wonderful teachers all along the way. The impact that had on me was really, well, it's what I want to provide for my students eventually. And that's a super common thing to hear from music ed majors, is like, I just want to give my kids the experience that I had. And that's sort of what I'm saying, but I just want kids to be able to use music for whatever they need it to be. And whether, for me, I found my eventual career path, my profession in music, but I also found who I was in music. And I didn't have as many struggles with finding my identity or my people or my sense of self in high school as some of my peers did, because I had music and I had this community to sort of grow in. And from there, it was that was a certainty. What I wanted to do was a certainty, and it was just a matter of figuring out where to do it. And that led me to my current university and my current situation. So there's more I could talk about, but we're at about the 20-minute mark, and so I'm gonna yield the floor.
Well, I was gonna say that a lot of the musicality that happens around this table is your fault.
Yep.
If you were to call it a bad thing. And so I was going to transition away a little bit and have you talk a little bit about what led to you liking music, because you've done it, obviously, longer than we have.
I wanted you to have what I had growing up.
There you go.
And I just wanted to cycle back to something you said at the very beginning, which was that you can't remember a time in your life when music wasn't part of it, and that's because it never was not part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, that's really true.
I mean, in utero, you were sung to, and from Nicholas sang to you, and your dad and I sang to you. We had music on in the delivery room, and then you were a cranky boy, and the one thing
sure was. It was a problem.
The one thing that was guaranteed to make you stop fussing was the little electronic keyboard that we had.
Yep.
And Nicholas would haul that out, plop it down on the floor, and turn it on, and you were instantly happy.
Crank up the jams.
So it really goes back to my grandparents. I can only speak with some authority about my grandparents. I don't know what I don't think your dad's grandparents were musically inclined.
No.
But your dad was, and Grandpa Dale was. They both sang in church choirs, and Aunt Kristen does. And but my grandmother was a wonderful pianist and could have been a concert pianist, but she chose to get married rather than go to school at Juilliard. And so she's probably the only, up to this point, professional musician in the family.
We're all just riding her wave.
Yep. And, she played in the silent movie houses. She was the music for there. And she also played in a band with my grandfather, which still blows my mind.
That's
I
that's
can't
crazy.
imagine either of them in a band. And she sang and played the piano, and he
Like a big band type feel, or
it
just
was the
a
20s,
couple
so
of instruments?
yeah. And then so her love of music, so she was always playing the piano, right, and probably singing to Grandpa Don. And he, of course, developed a tremendous love of music and played the saxophone and the clarinet, and he was in the marching band. And
Did he play those after high school or not really?
So not really. I mean, he transferred from the Madison campus of the University of Wisconsin to Stevens Point. I think it was just a semester, because he decided, I'm going to be a professional musician. And he went there and he took a bunch of music classes, and then kind of started to look at what life as a saxophone player would be like. And
a lot of time on the road.
Yeah. So this was circa 1950. And he just decided he wanted a more bankable, solid, steady income, and he went back to Madison and to pursue his medical degree. But music he never stopped doing music. He always did choir from that point on. When he graduated, even when he was in medical school, he sang in the church choir, was a member of the choir at our church for over 40 years, and it was just always part of who he was as a person. That was sort of what made him feel whole. And it was kind of his outlet where he could let go of everything for a little while and just do something really enjoyable. And then Grandma Helen, my mom, same, kind of more like our upbringing. It was just lots of participating in music. They sang everywhere that they could. And Olive taught herself to play the piano, and Alice taught herself to play the organ. It's
That's
just
the craziest one to me. Teaching yourself to play the organ.
Yeah. And so there is like genes, right? There's musical genes flowing through. There's a certain amount of talent that you were born with, but then that has clearly been fostered with nurturing. And so growing up, my brothers and I all played 2 instruments. We all played the piano and then something else.
Wow.
And that's what I wanted you to do. I wanted you guys to do the piano and something else. And I almost got there with you.
We did one guitar lesson, and you and I went home and we were like, this is hard.
This is hard. Guitar is hard. I love to have that conversation, like with people who play the guitar or play the violin or the cello.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them, I'm like, I think that is so hard. And they're like, what? It's just one staff, one note at a time, and you're playing 2 staffs and all these notes. I'm like, I know, but it takes 2 hands to make 1 note, and that's really
it's very strange.
That's really stressful to me. But yeah, so we all played piano all up until we graduated from high school. Most of us, I think Donnie's the only one who took his second instrument to the end of his senior year in high school. Saxophone.
Okay.
Brian played the trumpet. Carl played the drums, and I was the flute.
Yeah.
And then singing. I was always in the church choir. I was in the itty bitty choir, kindergarten, all through high school. I was in the church choir, and I sang my freshman year in high school, and then after that, and I just didn't have the wonderfully enjoyable experience that you had, and it just felt like it was taking up space in my schedule.
Sure.
Rather than
you were a track star.
You were a jock.
Yeah, I was an athlete.
Neither of us had the experience of being a jock in high school. I did sports for freshmen. I did swimming, if that counts as a sport.
It
does.
I wasn't a diver. That wouldn't count.
That wouldn't count. That's a performance.
Yeah. But yeah, I certainly never took it to the same level.
Yeah.
So
Come for the music commentary, stay for the swimming
The-
hot takes.
Yeah.
the edgy aquatics hating.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was just taking up space in my schedule, and I could have been, taking something else. And then I went to college, and I have often been asked, why weren't you a music major in college? And a small part of me at this point in my life wishes that I had been a music major, because I think ultimately I maybe could have done something professionally with music, but I didn't want music to be my job.
Right.
Music was always that special fun thing that I did, and I was afraid if that became my job, then it wouldn't be special anymore.
And it is a paradigm shift when it becomes your work.
Yeah.
When it becomes your source of stress instead of your outlet for stress.
Right, your stress reliever.
And I talked to, I don't mean to interrupt your story, just a quick aside. But I talked to a number of professional musicians, and I'll say, what kind of music do you like to listen to in your free time? And they'll say, I don't
listen to music.
I don't listen to music in my free time. Music is my life, and so when I have a free moment, I like to distance myself from it. And I certainly understand that impulse, but I'm hoping that's never me.
I haven't reached that point yet, anyway.
I still try to enjoy it from time to time. So anyway, continue.
But so that's why I didn't pursue a music degree. And then I sang with the symphony chorus for a couple years, and then I went to graduate school, and I just didn't have the mental energy to do both, because the symphony chorus is fun, but it's also stressful.
A lot of work.
Yeah, and it's not as, for me personally, I shouldn't say this as a generality.
Yeah.
For me personally, it wasn't the outlet that I wanted.
Sure.
A little bit less loving.
It was less loving, yes,
Yeah.
and so then I shifted to doing like community chorales rather than that, which were just more people who loved to sing, and we put on concerts, and we sheepishly asked people to pay to come and listen to us sing.
Please, we can keep this going because we all like it.
But yeah, so I gradually moved into just singing. And I think I know I'm a better singer than piano player. I think if I put the same amount of time into piano that I did to singing, I would definitely be better. But so then we moved to South Carolina, and I had children.
Oh, the worst.
And
biggest two mistakes
if you
of her life. Sitting at this table.
No. Our life in our house was a little bit like living in an opera, because you woke yourself up. I never woke you up, but I would know you were awake, and I would walk in, and I would say, good morning, and we would start the day singing.
Yeah.
And then, I'd be working on your lunch, and be like, Nicholas, what do you want for lunch today?
Right.
And you're just like,
I mean, you did that up until I was probably in high school.
I
like, kind of
did,
sing-songy.
And I would call you. I'd be like, it's time for dinner. And so I just tossed it out there.
Yeah.
I never thought of
Always.
that as an intentional parenting technique. So I was just like, yeah, mom's weird. She sings to us.
It's just me being weird. It was not so much parenting as just
It's both. It's both things.
It's just me, just trying to be goofy and make you smile mostly. And then I did a kinder music class with you.
Yep.
And the teacher was going to have her second child, and she was no longer going to teach kinder music after that. And she pulled me aside after class, and she's like, I think you could do the training, and you could take over this class. And I was like,
Sure.
okay, I can do that. The unfortunate thing about that was neither of you wanted to do kinder music with me as the teacher.
Sure.
You wanted to do it with as an activity together, but once I became the teacher, you didn't want to do
was
it
weird.
anymore.
Yeah.
And so
Don't want mom telling me what to do.
no. So that was a lost activity for us.
Right.
Because I took over.
Can I interject that
teacher.
for whatever reason, I remember making worms in dirt with kinder music, which sounds disgusting, but it was a little like Dixie cup or like a plastic like water fountain.
We did it in a little bowl.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But I remember like, so you would take gummy worms and you would stick them in, and there was like
ground up
Oreo cookies over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me why.
It was
Totally.
That was a long time ago.
It was the activity that we did in one of the older, like in the summer camp.
Oh, okay.
For kinder music summer camp.
It's like almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, you were probably 4. Because I think that was like 4s and 5s that I did that for. Yeah, so you did a semester of Suzuki violin when you were 3.
You can tell that I'm quite the violinist these days.
Which meant I did a semester of Suzuki violin because the parents do
Learn
it
as well.
with the kids. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time doing. That's about how it sounded.
Oh, man.
And then we paid for that.
I don't know if you
Boy.
learned anything but Twinkle. I don't know, but you didn't want to do it anymore.
I don't know
so.
if there's anything harder than beginning strings.
To either do
Recorder
or experience. The experience of rudimentary violin or, cello is a lot of
But I don't think we started piano. I would have started piano with you, with Gary Rutkowski, in South Carolina if we had stayed.
Right. No, I think I was 7. And
Yeah.
It was down the
And I
street.
think Gary didn't really want kindergartners. I think is why he just felt like there really isn't any reason not to do piano in kindergarten, but it's easier when you can read a little bit. And so you could cover in like 6 weeks in first grade what it would take you all year to do in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so we just put it off. So we came here and then started looking for piano teachers.
It's hard to teach A through G when you don't know what those
are. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you really enjoyed singing in the choir in middle school, and then got really excited to do high school singing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had this negotiation about you stopping piano.
Yes, I was 16.
And he said, how about if instead of continuing with piano lessons, I sing in the church choir? And I said, I want you to do both.
I said, no!
That's not
a good deal.
Works.
I remember exactly what I said because I was pretty proud of this argument at the time. And I said, Mom, you are paying a lot of money to give me piano lessons that I don't want and that I don't practice for. If you let me out of the piano lessons, I will join the church choir and I will not complain about it.
But the great thing about that was, if you recall, I told you to ask your choir teacher at the high school, who is a wonderful multi-instrument musician.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask her for her input. And I said, and tell her to be honest, because because I want to know what she says. And she just gave you, it was a great answer for me. And I loved how much she respected the question. You know, and it was like, you know, music teachers would rather have someone who wants to be there,
Crazy.
because it's you know, it's a waste of their time, and it's a waste of your time. She did feel like her piano was incredibly valuable to her, but based on what you wanted to do musically, did not think that it was, you know, a necessity. Like she's, and I remember she said, I'm not sure if I should answer this as a parent or as a teacher. Because she could see what I wanted, and she would want that for her child as well. But as a teacher and as a practitioner, she just looked at it very practically, and she's like, you know, it's not really gonna impact you that much if you give up.
Well, and I would say
piano.
in hindsight, I hated the piano. I did. I didn't want to practice because I was always good at singing without really having to try. And I had to try to be good at the piano.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating. I mean, it sounds really snooty, but that is exactly why I didn't want to practice, because I was good at singing on my, you know, I didn't have to do anything because my relative pitch was good enough that I could just kind of sing. But I think that was the right decision, because now, I mean, over the summer I had the foundation that I was able to sit down and learn to play chords to some rudimentary songs that I wanted to sing along with.
Right.
And so now, as I'm getting older, I'm actually circling back around and being more interested in piano because you didn't beat it out of me when I was younger. And if you had said, no, suck it up, you have to play until you go to college, I might not be there right now. I might still be like,
you'd still be done with piano.
I'm still, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, so it's just, it's sort of part of our family culture. And my brothers, Donnie's really the only one who has taken music the same way that I have. Carl played in a band for a while. He did that into his 30s. And Brian is he's the one that makes us sad, right? Because he has this beautiful voice, and we're all like, you should sing in a choir, and he's like, I don't want. But he loves music. We all love music. We like to go listen to it, and we like to, you know, Donnie and I like to do it. It's just part of it, you know, our lives are poorer right now for not being able to be involved in our musical activities. So
and sometimes that's a win, you know, like you're talking about your brothers who don't really sing or play instruments anymore but still enjoy music. Sometimes that's a perfectly acceptable end goal.
Absolutely.
Like if you're a music appreciator and it brings joy to your life, and you go, if you have family who perform and you go to their concerts, or if you just love music and you participate in that, that's fantastic. And that
all of us performers need people
exactly
like that.
We need people who want to come to our shows.
we need audiences. Benjamin gave a concert this year with no audience.
Oh my gosh, yeah. it was strange for sure. It would have been more odd, I think, if we had left in the breaks for applause. For there to be none.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because my directors at college sort of structured the program so that a lot of the pieces went fairly seamlessly into the next one. Or we did something intentional and purposeful in moving from one piece to the next. And so it felt essentially about a half-hour concert. Felt essentially like the music just kept going.
Almost didn't stop.
30 minutes, and then we got to the end and did bows. And all of a sudden it was like, I am so aware that there's no audience there. Because it's like, I would like to acknowledge the soloist.
blank.
Behold him. And so, yeah. But honestly, there's definitely a part of it, even when you are performing without those blank spaces in between, that is lost without the energy to feed off of the crowd. And it's not necessarily like at my choir concerts everybody's like standing up and cheering and dancing around and like holding up signs and like, oh my gosh, we love you. It's not that kind of energy, but
you can pick up on their appreciation because they're smiling or they're nodding their head,
or there's
and
you just sort of have this sort of have a sixth sense for when something really powerful has happened.
Yes.
Musically in a room full of people. And especially I love audiences that know I love audiences that know less about music, and I love audiences that know a lot about music for very different reasons.
Yeah.
And I love to see the different things that they appreciate. And how the same piece can be so meaningful to people who can't match pitch. And it can be meaningful in a very different way to professional musicians. And so I think that sort of, we talk about music is the universal language, which is a little bit cliche and a misnomer, but there are these sort of cool effects of they're thinking about it differently but emotionally having similar experiences, and I think that's really cool.
It's a universal
experience, perhaps,
creation, because every culture has its own music.
True. Something
that they do, whether it's just rhythm, or swaying or sing. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
We don't all speak the same language, but
right.
we all have music as part of our culture.
And that's a really interesting sort of human anomaly, right? Because, and we could talk about this at a later date, but we're not really sure why. I mean, there's evidence of song and dance and instruments that are the traditions that are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. And there's no particularly strong evolutionary evidence for any reason to do that, other than, I don't know, pack bonding, maybe, like you get together with your buddies and y'all go oonga boonga together. Like,
well, and Kinder Music has done a little bit of research, and some of the stuff that we do just sort of innately as parents is actually good for infant development. And so, like the swaying and just the soothing vibration of singing, and and stuff like that. And so it's interesting. It's like how, like, which came first, right? How did people just realize that, oh, my kid, I hum a little bit and my kid is quiet, or is it just kind of something that it's just one of those ancient things that's part of our DNA?
You heard the birds singing. So
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, because that's sort of a more practical tool, like the birds. That's
like mating calls.
Yeah. It's communicative.
Communicating.
And so, it would be interesting if that's sort of way back, the origin of human music, was it served more of a practical purpose, and then as
like seeing different colors.
As I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think I was gonna say something like, as social organization becomes more complicated, your practical stuff can sort of be ornamented to make it entertainment. Right. So I'm wondering if
well, and some of those dances are what's the word I'm looking for? Symbolic, right?
Yeah, a lot of spiritual significance.
Yes, and they would dance a certain way for a specific purpose, and that was less for your enjoyment, again, and more for a practical reason.
Right.
So it's just, it's just evolved with us over time.
Yeah. Well, and it can serve so many different purposes, right? Because I'm not going to talk through my entire musical history because a lot of it is really similar to Benjamin's
at all.
There's my grandmother likes to claim that she was the first person who ever heard me sing.
Yep.
She apparently was pushing me around in a stroller when I was an infant. I wasn't speaking
You weren't talking yet.
And she was humming a hymn from church, and she claims that I was able to hum it back to her. I don't know why she would lie about that, but she was the only one there.
Oh, she came in, she was all excited.
Okay, well...
No, I think it actually happened. I don't think she made that up.
And so a lot of the experiences after that point, up until I graduated from high school and went to college, were the same as Benjamin's. We went to the same middle school, we went to the same high school. I did not do cello, but we took piano from all the same people. But there's two particular moments that I distinctly remember, and the first was when I was in 8th grade. And we were doing Carol of the Bells at West. I'm curious to see if you remember this, because I was standing in our living room upstairs practicing, and you were sitting in the office, and you came out.
I asked you if you wanted voice lessons.
Yeah. and you said, that was actually really good. And so that was the first sort of moment of like, wait a minute, maybe this is something that I should be working on, And then when I got into high school, shout out to Mr. Cave, who one of his tenets of the freshman year choir was go out for every solo. Even if you're scared, even if you don't think that you'll get it, even if you say, well, that's too high for me, that's too low for me, just do it.
Just do it.
Especially as a learner, because at worst, you get a critique from your teacher, and you learn from that, and you move forward, and you don't get the solo. But what happened for me is I got a solo. And I was like, wait a minute. And
something that can happen to people who go out.
If you go out for solos, you might just get one.
And Mr. Cave left that part out of that speech. He was like, "What's the worst that's gonna happen?" I'm like, "The worst that happens is I get the solo.
I'm gonna have to sing in front of people on my own."
Left that out.
But the reason that I say that is I have always struggled with the sort of colloquial term is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So feeling like I am not up to par with everybody else who is around me, and it's only a matter of time before they all figure out that I've been lying this whole time, and then they will all be very upset with me, and they'll throw me out of whatever it is that I'm participating in. And I've had that with sports and academics and music and everything.
It is pervasive in the musical community, especially at higher levels of learning.
What are you telling me, that the people in your choir at school have imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, people who are a lot better than me are worried about not being good enough to be there, and the fact that they're worried makes me worry more. So all of you who say, "Oh, that just really didn't sound good," when you're singing in like our studio classes or departmentals, stop, liar!
Stop lying. It sounded great, and you know it.
But what I was going to say is that it's really frustrating, because you can write off getting like an A on an exam as a fluke, right? And so the fact that I continue to get solos to do in various concerts throughout my high school experience really forced me to realize that not only was this something that I enjoyed doing, but I was actually really good at it.
You were good at it.
To the point that I think as a senior, I was probably a little bit full of myself. I was
also pervasive.
Funny how those two things go together. But what happened was I went off to college, and I decided to transition from classical to jazz, because I didn't feel like I had time to do both like I did in high school. My senior year in high school, Benjamin and I, well, you did it junior and senior year, and I did it senior year. You sing in the top classical choir and the jazz choir at our high school. And so when I auditioned for the jazz program as a biology student in college, my thought was, I'm going to get in the top group because I went to this jazz festival last year and I got an award for an individual solo performance. I'm kind of a big deal. So let's just, if we can just keep this rolling. And then I didn't. I did not get into the top group.
Did you see my award?
Did you see my award? I mean, it's got your name on it, guy that I just auditioned for. Not only did I not make the top group, I didn't even make the second top group. I made the third group.
Made the C choir.
Yeah. And I was mad. I was not happy. I don't know if I was mad, but I was sad and kind of stunned, frankly.
Yeah. Very disappointed.
And there was a very distinct conversation as I started to move on from that, and I was talking with you about this, that I experienced. It was a rehearsal or a performance of one of the other groups. And I texted Mom and I was like, can you get a feel for me on the quality of the jazz program at the University of Northern Colorado? Because I've got some questions. And it turns out that it's about as good as it gets this side of the Mississippi and north of Texas.
Yeah.
So,
well, especially the vocal jazz.
Especially in particular the vocal jazz department. Yeah. There was a teacher there at the time by the name of Carrie Marsh, who is an incredible human being and is kind of a jazz god. So, the great Carrie Marsh. Yes. There was a concert that we went to that he was not involved in that was a jazz concert, and they did one of his pieces, which if you go to any vocal jazz concert anywhere is probably going to happen, that there's going to be a Carrie Marsh arrangement involved. And they introduced it as the great Carrie Marsh. And so at this point I had made a choir that he was directing. I was in the second group. And I went back and I said, I gotta tell you that you are the great. Which I just thought was hysterical. But what it sort of woke me up to was that it sounds so stupid, like duh, that there is always, in all aspects of life, but in music in particular, you can always be doing better at something. So I picked up vocal percussion in college as a way to sort of weasel my way into those top groups, because they needed somebody who could do vocal percussion. So I figured it out and I got to perform with the top group because I told Carrie that I could do it. And
which was a lie when you told us.
We figured it out as we went along, and I'm pretty good at it.
You were on that stage more than anybody else that night.
That's true.
Because you did VP for 3 choirs.
3 choirs, sang in one. But that sort of shocking experience of realizing how much work that I still had to do, but at the same time being part of such an incredible program, was really enlightening for me. And I continued to follow Mr. Cave's advice of going out for every solo. And I got one my junior year singing a Kurt Elling version of Menuano that ended on a high A. And if you don't know me, I am a bass.
It means low.
It means low notes are better. And the high A was a problem. That's what he does. But just to sort of wrap things together, the music has played, very much pun intended, an integral part in all of our lives. And it's something that, the journey itself brings us joy. At least in my opinion.
Yes.
If you only enjoy performing and you don't enjoy rehearsal, performing is not for you. You can do it, but I would argue that it's probably because, performing, unless you're in a truly professional group that you tour and you don't see anyone else except for when you're touring, like you don't rehearse with the members of the choir, like you show up and go. That's really, the only time that performing would take up more of your time than rehearsing. And otherwise, you're going to spend probably 95% of your time in rehearsal with people that, by gosh, you should turn around and make friends with if you can. There's a lot of really good people who do music. There's a lot of things that are worth knowing. There's a lot of people that are worth knowing, and there's a lot of good to be gotten out of it.
Yep.
At least in my opinion.
Yeah. I have lifelong friends from my time in various choirs.
Right. There are all these sort of extra added benefits of musical involvement beyond just I really like to sing and I got to do it. And there's a lot. We could do another episode on like the psychological, emotional development impacts of music. The one that doesn't count is like a lot of times at All-State Choir they'll like to read off the average ACT score of groups and be like, look at what music did for them.
Smart we are! Oh my god!
And as a future educator who might get more funding from tricking people like that,
You're gonna continue to do that.
I don't.
A lot of mathematical and sciencey people also like music,
Right.
and that's why their
Right.
ACT scores are high.
Right. Well, and it's also it's just by sampling from like students who are involved in something other than academics,
Right.
like automatically you're gonna see a bump because it's just like these people are motivated. These people know how to practice. And,
Sure.
They used to joke in the music department at Presbyterian College because so many people in medical school talked about the time they spent doing music that they used to say they were going to offer themselves as pre-med.
Just to rope some people in if they could.
We need more majors. We're pre-med.
It'll take you a whole semester to realize that we haven't done a science class yet. And then you're stuck. Subliminal messaging.
Yeah.
You actually want to perform.
Yeah.
That's my next class at music school is tricking people.
Tricking
people.
Into taking lessons with you. Yeah. You get your hooks in them, and then you just keep
never
'em.
let go.
Just keep them.
Just keep them.
Well, we're encroaching on an hour now, if you can believe that. We've been talking for quite some time. Hopefully this is interesting to those of you who are watching. Like I said, it's meaningful to all of us, so we felt like it would be worth sharing with all of you. We would love to hear your musical experiences in as much depth as you would like to provide, because kind of the crux of all of this is the connection that you can form with music and with other people through music. And so we would love to hear from you guys.
And the fact that we don't have live music in the same way as we usually do right now, and how awful that is. It's awful. And so if putting our little message out into the world encourages somebody to give a little donation to your local high school music department, then I wouldn't complain. I wouldn't stop you.
The other thing that I wanted to say before we wrap up is that we always would like to know what you guys would like for us to talk about. So if you have anything that you are interested in, that you would be interested in hearing us pretend to know things about, please let us know.
Otherwise, it's going to be Mario Kart this week. I don't get anything, it's going to be Mario Kart. You can stop that from happening.
If you have survived to this point in the program, thank you so much for sticking around. And everybody take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for hanging with
Thanks,
us. See you
everybody.
next time.